Hi everybody, and welcome back to review topic number 2 for Unit 3 in Math 1, which is about identifying special points on a graph. So our last review video focused on finding sections, intervals of a graph, and this is going to focus on finding special points. So we're going to look for one point at a time that has a special name on a graph. Sometimes we need to describe special points. When we do this, we use notation that looks like this. We're going to use parentheses x comma y, where this first number is always the x coordinate of the point, and the second number is always the y coordinate of the point. And we're going to use parentheses here because instead of identifying an interval, we are identifying a special point. So here are a few of the special points that you need to know how to find. The first special point is what's called the x-intercepts. The x-intercepts are the place where the graph touches or crosses the x-axis. So on a graph, the x-axis is the horizontal axis on the graph. And I'm going to look for the places where the graph crosses or touches the x-axis. There can be more than one answer for the x-intercepts. On this graph, for example, there would be an x-intercept right here where the graph touches the x-axis, as well as right here where the graph touches the x-axis. To name those points, I would name them parentheses -6, 0, because this first point has the coordinates -6 as x and 0 as y. And the second point would be called 4, 0, because that point has an x coordinate of 4 and a y coordinate of 0. The second type of special point that you might be asked to identify on a graph is what's called the y-intercept. Now, just like the x-intercept is where the graph touches the x-axis, the y-intercept is where the graph touches or crosses the y-axis. Now, on a graph, the y-axis is the axis that goes up and down. So I'm going to be looking for the place where the graph touches the y-axis. Now, there can be only one answer for this question, and the reason is because if there's more than one answer, this graph wouldn't be a function anymore. It wouldn't pass the vertical line test. So a y-intercept only has one answer. On this particular graph, the y-intercept would be located right here, and my ordered pair, my point, would be the point 0, -2, because the x-coordinate is 0 and the y-coordinate is -2. The next special point you might be asked to find on a graph is a point called the maximum. If you look for a maximum on a graph, you're looking for the highest point on the graph. When we find the maximum, we write it like this: some number, and this is going to be the y-coordinate, when x equals the x value. For example, on this graph, the highest point on the entire graph is right here. And so when I name that point, I would say that the highest this graph goes is 4, because that is the y-coordinate, and that happens when x is 7. So I would write 4 when x equals 7. The last special point you might be asked to find on a graph is the maximum. This is going to be the minimum. This should say minimum. I apologize, there's a typo on my paper. Is the minimum. The minimum is going to be the lowest point on the graph, and when we find the minimum, we write it the same way. We give the y value when x equals the x value. So instead of writing it with parentheses, we write it a slightly different way. On this graph, the minimum is located right here. That's the lowest point. So we would say that the lowest this graph goes is -6, and it does that when x is equal to, in this case, -3 is the x value. All right, that is it for your review of special points on a graph. Thank you so much for watching, and next you're going to do some practice with this idea of finding special points.